Hello, and welcome to the OMC Developers Blog number 4. My name is Garv, and today we are going to talk a little bit about game evolution. And what does that mean exactly, game evolution? When we think about making anything, whether you're making a game, whether you're making a cake, whether you're making a bookshelf or a car, or whatever it is that you're making, when you're creating something, there's always that beginning part where you're trying to lay down the ideas of what it is that you want to do. A lot of times that starts with something. Let's say you're sitting around with a buddy and you're at a bar or something, and your buddy says, "Hey man, you know what would be really awesome? If we did X." And then, from there you go, "No man, I don't think it's a good idea." Now, I think it'd be great. Think about it. Think about what we could do. You could do X, Y, and Z. And then the other was like, "I don't know, man. Last time we did that, we did A, B, and C, and it was terrible." Like, no. We learned from that. We're gonna be able to do this with that, and let's do something with that. And so that's the beginning. When you finally decided that's the thing we're gonna work on, and we're gonna move on from there. That part, just getting it off the ground, is like the hardest thing. In truth, I have notebooks and notebooks of stuff that I've worked on, or I don't even say worked on, just ideas that I found or had a wild hair in my head, and I wrote them down, and I put them in a notebook, or I wrote them on a slip of paper or whatever, and I've collected them over the years. I have tons. I have so many, it's insane. But a lot of those ideas never went anywhere. I never actually did anything with them. They're just ideas in a notebook. And I could probably do a whole video on just taking that idea from the beginning to actually converting it into something. That's a process in and of itself, like deciding what the concept is. Can you actually do something with? Would it be fun to work on or interesting to work on? What its long-term prospects are? Can you make any money off of it? Is it just something you're doing for fun? Whatever the case, like there's all these little details, all these little things that you have to worry about, and as you are fleshing out your idea. But that's outside the scope of this video. We're just going to talk about the evolution in general and how we started from that concept and moved on, and then how things change as you move along that process. So thinking about the concepts of what you're trying to do. So whether you're making a game or whatever, in this case we're going to focus on games, but you pretty much go through the same process whether you're writing a story or a book, or making a car, or whatever it is that you're doing. The process is still pretty much the same. Is now that you've got your concept, you're thinking about, okay, well, what is this thing, and how does it function? What does it do? And sometimes you go through a lot of iterations just in that process. You haven't even written a line of code. You're just jotting things down, and that's why a lot of times game developers will make what they call a design doc, which basically will take your general thoughts about what it is that you're working on and lay them all down so this is what we're gonna do. We're gonna do this with this concept and this thing and this thing, and you basically just lay everything down so that you can have some kind of focus. But more than that, if you're trying to get money or whatever, usually they want to know, what are you making? And they want to see your design doc so that they can kind of decide whether they should back your project or whatever, right? But it's also good reference and to keep you on track because you know what's going on. Now, that's not true all the time. Sometimes design docs are fluid and they change a lot, and when they change, you're always adjusting or whatever. So what you started with and what you end with are two completely different things. I think the general idea of laying out your design doc is that you're going to follow that through. These are the concepts that you're working on. These are the things that you're going to do, and then as you move on, you can see kind of what's going on. And I try not to make my design docs fluid. I try to lay them down as the framework of what the overall game is going to be. So that way I don't get into what we call where you've got something where you're just adding new things on top of that, and you just have too many. They're just eventually you have so many things in your project that you're just adding. So you want to avoid that. Actually, I try not to because I want to keep things flat. Like, this is what we're going to do, and work with that, and then build on top of what we've already established that we're going to go with. Now, as you're laying down on once you have your concept, then you look into sometimes you talk to other people. Basically, there's some influences that help you decide kind of where you want to go. A lot of times in the beginning days, when you're first talking about stuff and you're first laying everything down, a lot of times what ends up happening is you have these ideas, and then you throw these ideas at somebody else, and they go, dude, that sucks. I wouldn't do that if I were you. That sounds like a dumb idea. And that can have you go back and refine your design doc so that you don't get stuck where you just working on a concept that when other people listen to it or talk about it or whatever, that they are not interested because they're like, well, that's a dumb idea. And that's not to say that some devs or writers or whatever don't get stuck on a dumb idea. Sometimes you just want to see what happens. You know it's a dumb idea. Like, in the back of your mind, you're going, this is a dumb idea. It's totally dumb. But you want to carry it out just because. I mean, why not? I mean, I'm already working on it. Like, why wouldn't I just keep this ball rolling? So that's not to say that design docs and things like that don't stop you from making dumb ideas, because they don't. They just help refine the idea that you're working on, even if the idea that you're working on is maybe not the best. But then as you throw that out to other people, let's say you talk to your wife or your friend or your parents or other game devs or whatever, you're talking to them about your concept and bouncing ideas back and forth, that gives you that, oh, okay, that's what I want to do. And so those influences can change what you started. So let's say you started out with an idea and you think, okay, well, this is going to be a first-person shooter, right? And you just standard, basic first-person shooter. That's what my original concept was. But by the time you actually talk to other people and got some ideas from friends and family and stuff, that it's now a real-time strategy game, and you go, wow, how did I go from that to that, right? But it's pretty easy to happen because influences, like, people just change your mind. And I think when you are first designing something, anything, it doesn't matter. I think the early days, it's a good idea to be really flexible. Because you want to make the best job, the best thing that you can, right? And so there's no point in being so rigid. In those early days, you don't have anything laid out, so everything is fluid. So you just try to changing things as you go. But I get the idea that you have this idea, like, I want to make a first-person shooter, and that is what you're basing that thing on. But, sometimes talking to other people, whatever, can totally change that into something else. Now, as changes happen, you get, from that point, now you're getting into the I'm making it thing. Like, you've already got beyond that point, now it's turned into something, and now you're actually making whatever it is that you're making. That's the hard part. Once you get down to the making, that's where your mettle is tested, because as much as people think, like, making video games or writing books or making cars or whatever, like, they think, like, that's amazing, like, that is so good, it's hard, games especially, because they take a long time. Sometimes, like, at least a book you can maybe, if you're dedicated, you could probably whip it out in, a couple days or a week or two, depending on how long your book is or whatever. But once you start getting into things that are a lot more tangible, video games, cars, I know I keep using cars, but I don't know, for some reason stuck in my head, planes, or making a house or whatever, to making a table, or whatever it is that you're making. Once you get to that point, that's where the blood and sweat comes in, and that starts to test you seriously. So I could show some videos, or not videos, but pictures of the early days of Skullforge. Like if I think back to my Kickstarter, and I know like people are like, you did a Kickstarter? Yes, we did, a long time ago. And yeah, it didn't turn out so well for us, but that's okay. Things happen. But in the beginning, when we were first thinking about it, we laid down like, this is kind of what we wanted. I did a lot of mock-ups because I at that time I was learning Unity. Now I knew game development and making stuff, but I hadn't used an engine quite like that. So being able to learn the engine was something I was working on at the time. And it's funny looking back, because when I look back at those old pictures of Skullforge, I go, wow, man, like I can't even believe that was me at some point. Like I did that. It's especially nowadays, it's hard to even imagine the game even looked like that. But it did, and so you can see here some pictures of the early parts of Skullforge. You can see like our texture work wasn't as good, the models weren't as good, and so it was a lot of stuff at the beginning. Like we used a generic model off of the asset store. Like I just needed a character, and I just picked one that looked kind of like I thought Desi would look, and I just used that character. So like for our Kickstarter videos and stuff like that, like I used that character, and I used that character for a long time. Like it was for testing purposes and animation and stuff, and so a lot of prototyping, which is also a part of game development. That prototype part, like once you actually start writing code, now we're gonna do the prototyping. Like how is this gonna work? How's combat gonna work? What's the general flow gonna be like? The general like angle of the camera, the overall aesthetic of the game, like what kind of vibe do you want to get? Now granted, the actual final look of the game usually isn't nailed down until you get way further in development. Generally in the early days, when you first get started, it's mostly prototyping and just kind of getting a feel for what you're trying to do, laying the concepts down. Once you lay the concepts down, then you can expand on that, and now you can get down to refining the look. But in the beginning, it's just I'm just laying it all down and stuff. And so you can see with these early pics of Skullforge kind of where we were going. It's interesting because a lot of these places, a lot of these pictures that you see, like the areas in the game aren't even there anymore. Like we got rid of them a long time ago, mainly because they were just prototypes. They were just things we laid down, and it's unfortunate that as far as our Kickstarter and stuff went, we thought at the beginning, hey, maybe lay down the concepts of kind of what we were going to do and kind of how that was going to work, and also show that we could actually do it by laying everything down. Maybe wasn't the best way to do it, but, hindsight, that's how it was, how it is. But you can see the early parts of kind of where we were going. It's interesting to look at. Like I said, a lot of the game doesn't look like that anymore, though I do think the lighting still pretty much is the same. We originally, like when I first was playing with this stuff, I thought I wanted toon shading. So like I don't have any pics, but like when I was first getting started, I found this toon shader and I thought, wow, let me try that just to see what it looks like. But at the angle my game is at, like I just, Skullforge just wouldn't look right with that. I didn't like the look at all, so I had to scrap it. But that's the whole point of the prototyping process. Like in the beginning, as you're laying it all down, you're playing with this and that and this and that. But I also think in the prototype stage is that point where you can actually play with stuff. Like that's the point where you can play with things, so that if you don't like it, you can change it, right? Because here's the other thing. When you are doing game design, like sometimes the beginning of it, when you're writing it down on paper, so like in the very, very beginning when I was talking about when you're just laying your game down, the beginning of it is, sometimes, you're just throwing things down just to see what happens, right? And so sometimes those ideas that you have on paper don't actually work out so well in the game. Like once you actually put it in the game and, you think, whoa, man, that sounded great on paper, but the reality is it's terrible and I don't like it. So you do have to be, at least I feel like you should be a little bit more fluid about what is actually going to go into your game in the final form. So then that leads to time, because as much as we like to think that we have a lot of time to do whatever, but we actually don't. Time affects the game too. It is actually probably the biggest influencer to the game. And I say that because if we think about time, let's think about that paint. Let's think about your house. You decide that you want to paint the walls to be a certain color. And at the time that you paint it, you think, okay, it would be great to be like a nice shade of pink. And so you paint the whole walls pink. But over time, you think, maybe that just wasn't the best shade. Maybe I should have went with something like a light blue. And so, time changes or can change how you view your own project. This, I feel like, is the biggest enemy to any project. For a couple of reasons. The first one is, first thing, you just get tired of looking at the same thing over and over and over again. I'm not going to lie to you. I've seen the beginning of my game so many times. Sometimes I look at it and go, you know what? I just want to change it. Just because I've seen it like a million times and I don't want to see it anymore. I want to change it into something else. And that's bad. The other thing is, when you are designing things, time means that you can add more things, because the more time you have, the more time that you look at it and go, you know what would be really cool if we added that. And then you end up with feature creep. And so that's like that thing that, you just go, oh, I got this thing on top of that thing on top of that thing on top of that. And it just keeps going. And next thing you know, your project's ballooned into something crazy and you go, oh my God, I can't handle all this stuff. Because a lot of times it sounds good on paper, especially when you think about how long it takes to actually implement something. Sometimes you can implement something in a day and you go, I put like this thing into my game. Like I put NPC random generation in my game in one day. Amazing. So now I can do whatever I want from that. Now, if that only took a day, then that means that maybe I could add this other thing. Maybe it'll only take a day too. And you find out very quickly that thing that you thought was going to take a day is now going to take you 6 weeks. And that's 6 weeks that you lost because you were thinking that it was going to be quick and easy. You're just going to be able to put it in there with no problems. So, time makes you think that you can do lots of things. And then, of course, there's the motivation to keep yourself going after so much time. After a year, you're still on that high, like, ooh, yeah, I'm still good. But year 2, year 3, year 4, year 5, year 6, year 7, you're thinking, okay, I never want to see this thing again. At that point, you're just like, I don't even want to look at it anymore. I don't want to see it. I don't want to look at it. I don't want to talk about it. And so, time can be that enemy that rears its head when you have too much time. Or, in the case the opposite is true if you don't have enough time. Let's say you're trying to get this done in a year and you're like, okay, we have a flat year to do this thing. That's all the time that we have. But if you had more time, you could actually look at all of the little pieces and try to make them better, right? And so that can cause a problem too. So managing the time is one of those things that some people are really good at and some people really suck at. I'm not gonna lie, I feel like in the beginning I was really terrible at it. I feel like I wasted a whole crap load of time. But I think these days I'm starting to get a little bit better about managing the time and go, okay, well, we don't have time for this, so I'm just gonna go ahead and do it like that, and that should be fine. But that's not true for everybody, because some people just are not good at managing the time. And then there's the table flip of the whole project. That's that point where you reach and go, you know what? This thing sucks. The thing that I have is sucky. And you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to flip the whole table and we're going to start over from the beginning. And that is one of those things that you go, oh crap, all that time that we wasted. And now we're doing it all over again from the beginning, from scratch. And sometimes it's necessary. Sometimes, you've reached a point where your code's spaghetti. You've added like a bazillion things into the game. Your systems are a mess. You've got shits in your project that's just like, it's been there forever. Old graphics, old things that are there, and they're just clogging things up. And so, you look at it and go, you know what? I think we need a hard reset at this point. Maybe we could salvage some of the old code, but we're gonna table flip the whole thing, gone. And that is, I don't even know how to describe it. I've been part of one project that actually did that, a big project that actually did the table flip. And I remember when the word came down that the table flip was going to happen, I remember thinking, are they fragging serious? I mean, not that the game didn't need it, because the original concept was bad. But, the thing is, did it really need a complete overhaul? Like, yeah. So, but it happens. It happens a lot. Sometimes that that game that you're anticipating, that you're really looking forward to, or even that book that you're waiting for, that Mr. Writer guy has been working on for the last year, and all of a sudden that book doesn't come out for a long time, and you wonder, well, why? Well, sometimes it's because they got the table flipped. They went complete overhaul. Whatever I wrote was ass. It turned out to be terrible, and now I got to get rid of it because it's bad. And that happens, unfortunately. Luckily for me, Skullforge hasn't hit that point yet. I don't think it will. But that's not to say that these things don't happen. And so the evolution of your game is how you get to the end product. And what's really interesting is, the one thing I find particularly interesting about game development in particular, because it's a lot easier to see in that case, or designing physical project, a table or a chair or house or whatever. The beginning product, when you're first looking at it and you go, okay, I can see where they're coming from. Like, I get the basic idea. You got the bones are there. And then the evolution to the final product. And sometimes the beginning and the final product are so different that you're just like, wow, that's the same thing. I can't even believe that that's even the same project. Skullforge is, I don't think it's been that drastic, but I can show some pictures of what it looks like now-ish. These are a little old, but at least you can kind of see compared to what it was. So with the early pics, and you can see what it looks like now. And you can see kind of how we've evolved from that to this. Now, there are lots of things that you can't see. the evolution of the combat system, which is something I'm working on right now. Evolution of a lot of the internal systems, saving the game, how do you save, that kind of stuff. So I mean, our original ideas of how we were going to do that were one particular way, but as time went on, I was like, hey, I don't really like it that much, so I decided I'm gonna go ahead and change it. And I thought that it was better for the game, because sometimes that's the other thing that you have to weigh, is the change that you have to make versus the amount of resources and what it's going to mean to the actual game in the long term. And sometimes, you could be like, well, we don't need to flip the table, but we do need to change this and this. Like, those things need to change because the thing that we have now is not good. And so we need to change to this new thing, because that's going to be a better thing in the long term. Players are going to enjoy that better. And that's why I guess the ultimate reason I made this is because I wanted to look at, or should I say, I was looking at my own stuff. I was looking at my game, like in the beginning. I was putting something together, and I was looking at my early pictures, and then I was looking at the newer ones, right? Or just what the game looks like now. And I thought, wow, like, it really changed a lot. I mean, it's crazy to think about, like, the way the buildings are formed out and stuff. And actually, before this goes on, before I end this video, I actually want to throw a shout out to 3D Forge. I know, last week I talked about middleware and using third-party apps and basically those kind of things, and how that can affect your project, positive or negatively, but how that affects the project. And one of the things that it's really been able to expand how we've been able to do the game is 3D Forge. They do, for the Unity store, and I think the Unreal store too, they do graphics and stuff, models and graphics and stuff. And the turning point for me was one day I was talking to him, and he did this one set on the Unity store that I thought was good, but it didn't quite fill out what I was looking for. And he was asking for some feedback on some things that he was working on. And I decided, that I was gonna ask him about doing something, because at the time on the Unity store, there just was this big old hole. Now, I talked about niche things, but this is another one of those niche things. There's a big old hole in the Unity store where there just wasn't anything for people who were looking for a particular thing. And in this case, it just happened to be the need for making buildings and medieval buildings and interiors and stuff. If you look at this picture here, this particular thing was done with one of the early things on the Unity store. It was something I picked up, paid a few dollars for, and I got it, and I thought I'd be able to use it to make dungeons and stuff. Like the idea is that I was going to be able to make dungeons and stuff. But once I got it and I put it in, I realized that there were so many pieces missing. It's like Lego blocks. It's like you're trying to build something with Legos, and you have your Legos in a box, but all of the type pieces aren't there. So, like, let's say you want to build something interesting. You want to build like a Millennium Falcon, right? But you don't have enough gray pieces, or you don't have enough seats, and you don't have enough little pieces for lights and stuff, and so, or you don't have them at all. And so I ended up going to the 3D Forge guys, and I was like, hey man, look, if you want something, an idea for something, then make some interiors, man. Like something that people can use to make the inside of a building. Make it all match, make it all fit, so that we can make insides of buildings. And you know what? He went and did it. shocked the hell out of me. I'm not even gonna lie. And I know this kind of gets outside of the scope of this video a little bit, but I want to throw that out because I feel like if you look at the beginning of when we were doing stuff and you look at the end of where we're at now, one of the things that drove that evolution from that point to that point was the introduction of 3D Forge's stuff. Once he went out and did that, and we were able to take those pieces, because he made them in pieces, like he took my suggestion and made them in little pieces, a wall, a table, a chair, whatever, and built on those things. Like I was able to take those pieces like Lego blocks and build rooms like you see here. Like you can see some examples, some rooms and stuff that I made using his stuff. Now, I know people are going to say, well, gee, Garv, that's just basically you using, what do they call it? What's the word for this? Asset flips. But that's not true at all. I always figure asset flips are always when you take something that is, take something that raw, like as it is, throw it into a project and just use it as is, right? You just take whatever that thing is, you throw it in your project, you don't put any real work around it, and you just throw it out there hoping that somebody's going to buy it. I always consider that to be an asset flip. That's not this in this case. I thought he did such an amazing job of putting that together. And I think that helped with my evolution. Because I'm not going to lie, there was a point in the time from the beginning of Skullforge till I got to the middle, and I thought, I'll never be able to do this. This project, as I said, it's only a couple of us working on this, and I thought I'll never be able to finish. But because he was able to do that, and we were able to get the things that he's done, and actually, to be honest, he's expanded. So he's done interiors, he's done exteriors, and the whole nine. Like he's laid it all down, and they're like Lego pieces. And if I could have paid him straight up for everything exclusively, I would have. But, I'm a poor man. Best I can do is this. And so I don't mind that, that stuff's out there for people to buy. If he's going to make money off of it, that's great. But it helps me and helped me quite a bit. We were able to move our project from that early stage all the way to where we're at today, all because of that. If we had never gotten that, I don't even know what to think of what the project was going to be, especially since I couldn't afford to pay for a 3D modeler or whatever at that time. So, hats off to you, 3D Forge guys. We appreciate it. And so, on that note, let me go ahead and wrap this up. I appreciate everybody listening to me, especially towards the end, kind of ramble on about stuff. But, hey, if you're doing game development, and I know it kind of sounds like an advertisement, but it's not. I just think if you find something like that, you find somebody who's working on something that, you're trying to get whatever. I mean, one of the biggest things, and I'll probably deal with this in a future video, one of the biggest things about people in the beginning, like when you're first starting out, is finding all the little pieces that you need, like an artist and a musician and people to do models and stuff like that. And so, there's all those things in the beginning that can help you move your project along as you start from the beginning and move to the end. And so, if you find somebody like that, hey man, reach out to them. Maybe they'll be more than happy to work with you so that you can actually move your project forward. And so if you are looking for interiors or whatever for your game or whatever, hey, I say check out 3D Forge's stuff. Their stuff is amazing. I mean, Cobus does a good job. So, I think, I thought it would be a good idea when talking about this to kind of throw a little shout out to my boy, because, I don't know what I'd be able to do without him. And so, yeah, on that note, if you guys have any questions or anything, feel free to drop them in the comments down below. I'll be more than happy to read. I also am interested in hearing your stories. Like, have you had the similar thing? How about the evolution of your own project? Like, how did you deal with the time factor and things like that? Like, yeah, feel free. Let's talk about it. So yeah, remember to like, subscribe, ring the notification bell, and we'll be around next time. And I hope that you guys have a great day and take care of yourself. I know the world's out there. It's a lot of crazy stuff going on. And to be honest, I haven't been outside really in days. So, it's kind of weird. I don't even know what it looks like out there. But, take care of yourself and be responsible. All we can do is be here for each other. And, this is just one way for if you just want to talk about some stuff, hey, feel free. But anyway, you guys take care. See you guys next time. Peace out.